So, for the most part, we've heard pretty standard interpretations. I mean, I think if you listen through all of these recordings, you're going to hear lots of different perspectives on Beethoven, and that's something I wanted to do. But if you don't know classical music very well, a lot of these things will sound pretty similar. I think the differences we're talking about sometimes have to do more with certain aspects of the sound quality, or maybe the difference between a period piano that resembles what Beethoven played on and a more modern piano that's what we hear today. These are subtleties, and I think the more you listen to classical music, the more you pick up on those things. But you could put some of these recordings side by side and not hear too many differences. Now we're going to hear some recordings that sound really different, and they take Beethoven off in completely new directions. And I couldn't possibly let the opportunity go to do this, because I think this really highlights something critical about Beethoven that we've been talking about all week, and that has fascinated me personally for the entire time I've known his music, which is his influence and the way in which other artists have responded to him. Of course, he was a titanic figure during the 19th century. Probably if you look over the 19th century at the influence of any given composer on everybody who got, sort of came after, Beethoven would probably be the one in the 19th century. And then in the 20th century, he's continued to be one of the most performed composers of all time. So much so that I think we tend to view Beethoven as a cold marble bust up on the mantle, removed from us. We venerate him, but I'm not sure we appreciate him as an individual with a more sort of human element. But that is a really essential part of his music. And another really interesting aspect of his music is the way kind of it opens up horizons for us in terms of our thinking and our feeling. And those are the aspects of Beethoven that I love to focus on and get away from the myth making and really think about him as a human, as a thinker, and as an expressive voice, because all of that is right there in the music. So there are some really creative takes on Beethoven, starting from really those points of view. And the first is just kind of continuing on the previous segment. We're going to go back to the Diabelli variations. We're going to hear a really interesting recording by Yuri Kane, and he is a hybrid pianist, plays all kinds of styles of music, and has undertaken a number of projects where he sort of zeroes in on a composer and recomposes the music in a totally different format. So here we have Yuri Kane playing with an orchestra, a Baroque orchestra, in fact, Concerto Cone, and they are one of my favorite groups to begin with, but it's really remarkable how their general history of Baroque music, in a way, set them up to play this kind of bizarre, recomposed, in places, improvised version of the Diabelli variations. And I really don't want to say anything more about it, because I think when you hear this, having just heard the piano version, it's just going to throw your ears wide open, and I hope give you a really wonderful appreciation for the possibilities that Beethoven laid out for other artists in writing his music. And I hope it also interests you in Yuri Kane. He's just a really interesting artist of our time. Then we're going to take a different turn and go back to a recording that I've known for maybe 30 years, or maybe even more, I'm not sure. My mom got me a couple of recordings by a guy named Don Dorsey when I was a kid. I think it was just a way for her to try and get me excited about classical music. I was already showing interest, and I think she figured, well, hey, let's give this one a shot. Don Dorsey did 2 albums of synthesized classical music, one based on the work of Bach and the other based on Beethoven. And so I was thinking about all the Beethoven recordings that haven't had an impact in my life, and I couldn't possibly leave this out. It's wonderful to go back and hear it. It's very sort of 80s synth meets Beethoven, but it works. And it's funny, as I still see people reviewing this album on Amazon saying, how interesting it is and how compelling it is. And so again, we have an artist from a completely different time with a completely different perspective, finding some meaning in Beethoven and finding a way to express that sort of with some new trappings. So we're going to hear a set of variations, to sort of stick with that variation theme, based on the Eroica music. And I just like this one because of the way that Dorsey uses the synthesizer sounds. And I also like the interpretation. To be honest, I think it's actually a pretty compelling reading of the piece. Just happens to be using some synthesized sounds. We'll move from that into something that steps maybe even further from Beethoven and out onto the disco floor. And just saying that, I think you probably already know what we're going to hear. It is Walter Murphy's A Fifth of Beethoven. There's been a lot of reinterpretations of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, a lot of sampling of the piece, but I don't think there's been anything quite like this. And one of the neat things about the recording I found for you is it's got a live video of Walter Murphy and the band playing the piece. So I think you'll get a huge kick out of it. Before we finish our program with a wonderful Beethoven interpretation by one of my musical friends and idols, Peter Schickley. Those of you who've been around the symphony for a number of years remember that Peter was here doing a residency with us. It was a huge moment in our history as an orchestra and such a great opportunity to spend time with someone who is an incredible musical mind and yet just can't suppress his amazing sense of humor. It's there in so much of his work, and of course it's always there in his legendary PDQ Bach albums. So this is PDQ Bach, aka Peter Schickley, and it's called New Horizons in Music Appreciation. And I really don't want to spoil it. If you don't know this, you are going to crack up when you hear it. It's so wonderful, so on point. It really shows you Schickley's knowledge of music and his understanding of Beethoven, but he does so in a way that's so much fun, so lighthearted, just so on point that you can't help but love it. And I think it's a perfect way for us to finish our radio hour interpreting Beethoven. So I hope you enjoyed this last segment, some different and lighter approaches to Beethoven, and hope you've enjoyed the whole show. As I said early on, please let us know what you think of the format. We want to make sure it works for everybody at home. And if you like it, we'll keep doing this with all kinds of different themes coming up throughout the year. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our other Beethoven 250 offerings. I mentioned we've got the Emperor Concerto that's paired with artwork by Waterloo's youth art team. It's an amazing collaboration. I think you'll be really moved by that. Bunch of conversations this week behind the scenes with our musicians, taking a look at what it takes to produce an online concert. And of course, we have the online concert itself featuring Beethoven's septet and other large chamber music from Vienna at that same time. So we'd love it if you check out our other online offerings. And in the meantime, enjoy some wild and wacky Beethoven to finish out this radio hour.